Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. My name is Hack, and in this video, we'll be ranking each of the 6 classes in the Elder Scrolls Online from worst to best. But this is not just any old ranked list, no. In this video, we'll be talking about the best hybrid classes in ESO. That's right, in this video, we'll be diving deep into hybrid theory crafting and examining which class has the best and most flexible abilities, both for magicka and stamina, that you can combine to make the perfect hybrid build. We'll be looking at strengths and weaknesses when it comes to damage, survivability, healing, buffs, rotation, class theme, and much, much more. Plus, I'll be including a full written version of this guide down below, with links to some of the best hybrid builds you can find for each class in ESO, so definitely check that out if you're interested, and let's jump right into the video. Let's start with what I think is the most challenging, the most difficult class to play for a hybrid build in ESO, and that is going to be the Necromancer. Now let me be clear, I'm not saying that the Necromancer class is bad to play in ESO. I know many players who enjoy playing the Necro, and they are completely amazing at it. This class can be a fantastic choice for both PvE and PvP content in both solo and group situations. However, it is my opinion that it is the most difficult in terms of building a strong hybrid setup due to some of its limitations. We'll get more into the challenges in just a minute, but let's touch on some of the good things first. Number one is that Necromancers have some of the best ultimates in the game. Colossus is fantastic in nearly all situations for any type of build, and don't forget you can also become basically unkillable using the Bone Goliath ultimate, so there's some really powerful options here. Even more than that, I would say that Necromancers have probably the best class passives in ESO in terms of raw power and stats. For example, Last Gasp gives you an extra 1250 health at all times. That's really good. Then you have Undead Confederate, which gives you a flat 200 magicka and stamina recovery bonus, great for hybrids, as long as you have a summon active. You also have Death Knell, which increases your critical chance, Dismember, which increases your penetration, and Rapid Rot, which increases your dot damage. So, as you can see, overall the passives that the Necromancer has access to are pretty good. So why have I ranked the Necromancer class last on our list of the best possible hybrid classes in ESO? Well, I have several reasons, and again, this is not to say that Necros are bad necessarily, only that they can be more challenging to play and set up correctly as a hybrid build, especially for newer players. Now, the number one limitation in my mind for the Necromancer is their lack of important buffs. At the point of creating this list, Necros are still the only class in the game that does not have a class skill in their toolkit that grants them major sorcery and major brutality. Those very important damage buffs that all other classes have access to at this point, including the Templar. I still don't know why that is. I don't know if it's ever been explained really, and it just seems like a strange limitation to me. In addition to this, there's no Necromancer skill that grants the major critical chance buffs, that being major savagery and major prophecy. So, as you can see right out of the gate, Necromancers are at a disadvantage and are forced to look outside of the box to get those important buffs elsewhere, instead of just having them included automatically on their most used skills, like a lot of other classes tend to have. Now, number two, in terms of limitations, and again, this is my opinion, is that Necromancer skills are more difficult to use and maintain, especially for beginner and intermediate players. One issue here is that the buffs that Necros need, like Spirit Mender and Skeletal Armor, seem to have shorter duration, sometimes less than 20 seconds. This is also true of their dot skills like Boneyard, which is only 10 seconds long, and both morphs of the Siphon ability, which are about 12 seconds long. Other classes generally have longer lasting buffs and dots, or morph options that increase the duration of those skills, or even passive skills that increase those durations by a few extra seconds, just things that make the rotation easier. But unfortunately, the Necromancer has none of those. I think Necros also have more complicated skills in general, where some of these require a corpse to be on the ground in order to cast the skill or to make the best use of it, which definitely takes some practice and getting used to. Again, not a bad thing necessarily, just more challenging compared to the other classes in the game. And finally, I will say that generally speaking, the Necromancer skill morphs we have access to don't feel that different from each other, so when you're looking at your skill options via those morphs, they all kind of feel the same. For example, you have a Flame Skull morph and a Poison Skull morph, but they both have basically the same purpose, which is to do damage. Same thing, I think, with Blast Bones. Both morphs for this skill do damage, and they have some minor secondary effects that don't make much difference either way, regardless of your choice of morph. The same thing again with Skeletal Mage versus Skeletal Archer, or Detonating Siphon versus Mystic Siphon. These morphs are technically slightly different, yes, but not to the point where it would really change your build in any significant way. And I think the whole point of hybrid builds, especially in this year in ESO where we've had so many hybrid updates and changes, is you should be able to play any way you want and create various different builds for the same class. But the Necro builds that I have tried just feel the same way no matter what. So again, not a bad class by any means, but definitely the most challenging in my opinion if you want to create a unique setup. In the future, I would love to see some buffs for this class, make those skill morphs more unique, and put Major Brutality and Major Sorcery somewhere on those class skills. It is time. Coming in at number 5, we have the Sorcerer class. Now, Sorcerer is a good class, but similar to the Necromancer we just looked at, they also suffer from some identity issues that limit your gameplay options when it comes to building a hybrid, particularly when it comes to choosing skill morphs. First, let's start with the good again. When I think of Sorcerer, I think of speed, I think of survivability, and self-healing. This is true regardless of which morph options you choose for the Sorc class, so you can always count on a fast-paced playstyle with good survivability, no matter how you build your Sorc, which is great. In particular, their class self-healing skill called Critical Surge is your main staple survival skill and should be used on all Sorcerer builds, but it's particularly good for solo play. In Update 33, your main defensive and speed morphs, both Hurricane and Boundless Storm, got buffed, with longer durations making them much easier to manage in a rotation, so this class can be very simple, nearly the opposite of the Necromancer that we just talked about, so the Sorcerer is a great choice for newer players or those who don't like bothering with complicated rotations. Sorcerers also have some of my favorite passives in the game, with great healing through the Blood Magic passive, cost reduction through Unholy Knowledge, massive reduced ultimate cost with the Power Stone passive, increased shock and physical damage, which is perfect for a hybrid build through Capacitor, and many more. In short, Sorcerers have a fantastic base toolkit to get things done in ESO. So why are they near the bottom of this list? Well, as far as limitations go, Sorcerers just don't have as many powerful morph options as some of the higher ranked classes on this list do. This is where I struggled with building my own hybrid Sorcerer recently for Update 33. In many cases for the Sorcerer class, one morph option just wasn't worth using at all, or was too difficult to fit into the build even if the skill was good. Let's use Crystal Fragments as an example. This skill is amazing. While slotted using other magic abilities, gives you an extra proc of this skill, allowing for increased damage and lower cost. Plus, you get a big chunk of passive healing through the Blood Magic passive we mentioned earlier, so this skill is really good. In fact, it's so good, I wanted to use this skill on my other weapon-based builds like a Bow Sorc or a Two-Handed Sorc for a true Bow Mage or Battle Mage playstyle. But in cases like this, where you're mostly casting stamina abilities on your front bar, you'll never get that Crystal Fragment proc since it depends on Magicka skills. It'd be nice to change this morph up somehow so that any Sorcerer build can use this ability reliably. Then we have other skills like Bound Armaments, which look great on paper. I mean, you stack up 4 Spectral Daggers, which you can then release for some extra damage. Plus you get bonus stamina and light attack damage while slotted, but again, this skill just falls a little bit flat. For one thing, the damage from proccing the 4 daggers is pretty bad, sometimes even less than the damage that you get on one normal DPS skill, and the stacking mechanic and rebuffing of this ability just feels clunky. This skill is nowhere close to the Nightblade Spectral Bow ability, in my opinion, which gives a big burst damage, plus self-healing effect. So it feels like Bound Armaments needs some cleaning up as well. Another example of poor implementation on the Sorcerer class is the Sorcerer Pets, which require double barring the skill so you don't kill the pet when you bar swap. So while hybrid Sorcerers can get huge burst heals by using the Twilight Matriarch, for example, you'll have to sacrifice 2 bar slots, one on your front bar, one on your back bar, to make use of this heal, which is a tough decision, especially when playing a hybrid where every skill counts. So overall, I would say as a class, Sorcerer has a good base to build on, is extremely fun to play and great for new players due to its simplicity, but once you start really diving into the theory crafting here, you'll notice a lack of good options that might be disappointing. Fun build, but limited. Moving on to number 4 on our list, the Warden class. And let me just say that numbers 1 through 4 on this list are all very close in terms of their potential to build a hybrid. So if you disagree here, feel free to let me know in the comments section below. There's always a chance that I missed something important here that could move these rankings around slightly. Now, the Warden is fairly middle of the road when it comes to creating hybrid builds in the Elder Scrolls Online. It does have some of the same issues with its morph options not being entirely unique, similar to the Necromancer class, but it also does have more stamina morph options than the Sorcerer, which is a good thing. As far as positives go, Wardens have some of the best buffs in the game for hybrids. They have all the standard buffs you would need, including Major Sorcery or Major Brutality for damage, and Major Prophecy and Major Savagery for critical chance. The Warden is also the only class I believe that has built-in Minor Berserk, thanks to the Bird of Prey skill, so you have tons of options in your toolkit. This also means you can run almost entirely class skills on the Warden if you want to, and even use consumables like Tri-Stat Potions for a bit of extra sustain. Now, Wardens are a strong defensive and survival-focused class with fantastic passive and active skills for both healing and defense. In terms of healing, Wardens can get passive healing from their Animal Companion skill, healing with light attacks from skills like Green Lotus or Lotus Blossom, and healing whenever they take damage from the Living Trellis ability. This combined with their Ice Fortress armor buff, which also provides minor protection, makes the Warden an extremely good class for PvP or solo PvE content. So why is Warden number 4 instead of number 1 on our list of the best hybrids? Well, I think Wardens are still missing a lot, in my opinion. One miss, as far as I'm concerned, is their class ultimates. The Bear ultimate, while a great idea in theory, suffers from some major identity issues. Both morph options here are hardly different from each other in terms of their functionality. The quote-unquote damage morph actually does less damage than the other morph due to how Warden passives work, and you have to double bar this ultimate, so forget about using any additional utility or passive type ultimates if you want to use the Bear. Warden's Healing Trees ultimate has also been nerfed in the past, and it's only a shadow of its former self. And while Permafrost can be a powerful defensive ultimate, especially in PvP, it's very lacking in the damage department. This is also just my opinion, but I feel like Wardens are one of the most gear-dependent classes in the game. And if you don't have good gear, like trials sets or arena weapons, then the damage and sustain on this class feels not as strong as others. For example, if you want to build an Ice Mage hybrid with a Frost Staff and a bow, you can totally do that on the Warden, but to really make it shine, it helps to use the Frostbite set for extra damage, and especially the Master's Destruction Staff while also using Frost Clench. With those two gear sets, this build absolutely slaps, but without them, it will be less than average. So in summary, Wardens are definitely a strong class. They have better buff access than Necromancers and better morph options than Sorcerers, helping to move them up on this list. But their issues with damage and sustain can make them a challenge to build a good hybrid setup if you don't have access to the best gear options in the game. Moving on to number 3 on our list, one of my personal favorite classes in the game, the Nightblade class. And I'm actually curious, for those of you watching this video, what's your favorite class in ESO? Let me know down in the description. And how would you rank it on this list in terms of the best hybrid classes in the game? And again, if you'd like to see some of these hybrid builds that I'm showcasing in this video, I'll have a link to the full hybrid written guide down in the description, which has all the builds that you're seeing in the background plus more. So what's good about the Nightblade? Well, there's 3 things that really stand out to me. That's damage, sustain, and self-healing. All 3 of these elements are very important in ESO and make the Nightblade a powerhouse class when it comes to solo or group play in both PvE and PvP content. Starting with healing, Nightblades have some great healing skills like Swallow Soul and Sap Essence in the Siphoning skill line, and Dark Cloak and Refreshing Path in the Shadow skill line. In terms of sustain, Nightblades can use Leeching Strikes or Siphoning attacks to gain resources and healing, and the damage for this class is just insane. Big burst damage from skills like Relentless Focus and Merciless Resolve can be further buffed by the Nightblade's burst ultimate in Cap Strike or Soul Harvest. Basically, any morph you choose here is a good option, which leaves plenty of room to tweak and build your character for a true hybrid playstyle. Nightblades also have very strong passives, particularly in the Assassination skill line, where they gain a lot more offensive potential and sustain, and the Siphoning skill line where they get tons of ultimate generation. Now, the limitations of the Nightblade class are similar, I would say, to the Sorcerer, namely that most of the quote-unquote good skills are all Magicka-based. Nightblades and Sorcerers both have relatively few stamina-based morphs when compared to other classes. Now, this may not be a problem for you based on how you like to play, but for me, It just felt like I was somewhat limited when building out a hybrid Nightblade setup. Basically, you can build out a Blood Mage with melee weapons, or a Blood Mage Archer with a bow, and that's about it. Both are insane great builds, by the way, and I have both of those up on my channel, but it's hard to do more than that with a hybrid Nightblade, because the morph options just don't allow you to do much more. I will also say in terms of difficulty, the Nightblade does rank towards the top of the list, along with the Necromancer for having more complicated skills and rotations when compared to other classes. Skills like Relentless Focus and Merciless Resolve, or Leeching Strikes and Siphoning Attacks require very consistent light attack weaving to be truly effective, which can be an issue, especially for new players starting out. Plus, Nightblades are the only class without a true armor skill in the game. Instead, their armor buff comes from the Shadow Barrier passive, which needs to be properly maintained by casting shadow abilities, otherwise your build becomes very squishy very fast. So in summary, Nightblades can make for very strong hybrid builds if you take the time to learn all the skills completely, can light attack weave flawlessly, and you can keep your buffs and your rotation going perfectly. And if you like playing a Blood Mage, they're great for that too. Well, if you've seen my channel before and are familiar with the builds I create here, you may be surprised that this particular class is not number 1. And yes, I've ranked the Templar class at number 2 for this list. Remember, this video is more about hybrid builds than anything else, and while Templars are certainly top tier in other categories such as solo builds, healing, and even PvP builds, they do have some issues that still need addressing for a true hybrid setup, which we'll talk about in just a minute. First, what's good about the Templar? Well, at the top of that list is certainly survivability and self-healing. Templars have the ultimate GOAT ability in ESO for dealing damage, known as Puncturing Sweep, an AoE damage skill that heals you back the more damage you do. Templars have equally powerful AoE, ground-based, and heal over time skills like Channeled Focus or Rune Focus, Extended Ritual, Purifying Light, and Living Dark. Templars also have one of the best burst heals in the game with either Breath of Life for group content or Honor the Dead for solo content. So, as you can see, if healing is what you like, then Templar will definitely be the top on your list of classes. What keeps Templar out of the number 1 slot for this list? Well, first is their lack of useful stamina morph options. Now, don't get me wrong, over time the Templar class has gotten a handful of powerful stamina morphs, but these still pale in comparison to the class's Magicka morphs in my opinion. Let's use Puncturing Sweep versus Biting Jabs for example. Now for most builds, including solo builds, PvP builds, and even group content, Puncturing Sweep is a much more desirable morph because it heals you back. Self-healing is always good in ESO no matter what build you're playing. All that Biting Jabs gives you in comparison is Major Brutality and Major Sorcery, which is certainly good as far as buffs go, but is it better than the best self-healing DPS skill in the game? I don't think so. Personally, I don't know what the best solution to this is. Maybe the base morph of this skill could get a small healing effect, like maybe 20% of the damage you do is converted to healing. The Puncturing Sweep morph could then still have the 40% heal that it has right now, and then Biting Jabs could retain that 20% base heal plus 1 additional effect. I think Templars have enough healing from other sources where then you would have a real choice of choosing one morph or the other, whereas right now I think one morph is really the only one that makes sense. Also, why is one of the most important damage buffs in the game, Major Sorcery and Major Brutality, tied to just one morph and not the other? This is terrible for hybrid builds in ESO because you need those buffs, but if you want them on the Templar class, you have to use Biting Jabs, which we just talked about isn't the best morph option. You're going to have to run something else like Rally or Degeneration to get that important buff on your character. Now, other than that, most Templar abilities do not have a stamina morph, or if they do, it's not super useful. The exception to this is certainly Repentance, which is a must-have for stamina sustain, and Restoring Focus for sustain and healing, but basically everything else in the Templar toolkit is very Magicka heavy. This can lead to some balancing and sustain issues if you're trying to build out a hybrid setup, and I think it gives you less options overall when theory crafting your build. Don't get me wrong, again, I love this class, but I think it works best as a pure Magicka build because those Magicka abilities are just so strong. But again, that's just me. Let me know what you think about the Templar class in the comment section below, and let's check out number 1. So my number 1 class for this video, again, talking about the best class for hybrids, is definitely the Dragon Knight, and I'm really excited that DKs are in this position right now. With some small tweaks here and there by the developers over the past 2 years or so, the Dragon Knight class has gotten so much better. It's really an amazing class for any content you want to do in ESO, whether it's PvE or PvP, solo or group content, and as a hybrid, this is the blueprint class as far as I'm concerned. Now, it's definitely not perfect, but the issues are small when compared to the other classes on this list. For one thing, Dragon Knights are slightly similar to Templars in that they do lack strong stamina morph options. This is more of an issue with ESO's initial class system design, as you see this pretty much across the board in all 4 of the game's release classes. They have more Magicka morphs than stamina morphs. Now, you can get around this with using weapon skills or guild skills if you need to, but beyond that though, everything else I see from the Dragon Knight class is positive, especially in this most current patch. For one thing, self-healing on the Dragon Knight has been buffed significantly, with the Burning Ember skill now healing you over time instead of just when the skill is cast. This of course can be combined with the Dragon Knight's many other powerful healing abilities, which will now scale with your highest offensive stats, letting you stack Magicka or stamina and heal equally as effective on any type of build. Defense and survivability has always been a characteristic of the Dragon Knight class, and this is still great, but sustain has also seen quite a few buffs on this class in recent history. This is really the key to the Dragon Knight and why I've ranked them higher than any other class on this list, because sustain for a hybrid build is life or death. You have to sustain both your Magicka and your stamina pools equally well in order to survive, and DKs have multiple options for this. First, they have the Combustion passive, which gives them stamina or Magicka back based on status effects. So Burning will result in 1000 Magicka back, and Poison 1000 stamina back. This is huge for a hybrid build. Then you have an even better sustain passive in Battle Roar, which gives you stamina, Magicka, and health back based on casting your ultimates. And I didn't even mention here that you can get all your basic buffs that you need on the DK, including increased damage and critical chance, which opens up your build to using Tri-Stat potions for even better hybrid sustain. So when you alternate those Tri-Stat potions with using ultimates and the sustain you get back from Battle Roar, the Dragon Knight basically cannot run out of resources. It's almost impossible. So everything that you need is there on the Dragon Knight class, and that's really why I've ranked it number 1 on this list. You have the damage, you have the healing, you have defense, tons of sustain, powerful ultimates, pretty much the complete package. It's really nice to see that Dragon Knights have come so far in ESO, and like I said, ranks 1 to 4 on this list are really very close already. So with just a few improvements, the other classes on this list could just as easily be there. But again, this is all my opinion, and I could be completely wrong here, so let me know what you think down in the comments section below. What's your favorite class, what's the best hybrid class, and why? As I said earlier, if you want to see more hybrid builds for the Elder Scrolls Online, for each class, check out the written guide for this one and our hybrid build section over on hacktheminotaur.com. Links for that will be down in the description. If you'd like to support the channel further, check out our YouTube membership where we have even more unique hybrid builds exclusively for our channel members. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you're doing well, stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.